Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Several feared dead and injured in a stampede at the massive Mahakumbh festival in northern India, as tens of thousands of devotees rushed to take their ritual bath in the sacred rivers. US President Donald Trump signs a fresh executive order to restrict gender transition procedures for people under the age of 19 in his latest move targeting transgender people since returning to office. Ukrainian drone targets a Russian nuclear facility and sets an oil refinery ablaze in the border region, killing a mother and her toddler. A passenger plane catches fire at an international airport while preparing for departure in South Korea's Busan. All 169 passengers and 7 crew members evacuated, 7 sustained injuries. And African nations pledge to provide electricity to 300 million people across the continent by the year 2030. The African Union plans to raise $90 billion from global institutions to implement this 6-year plan. Hello and welcome. Our top focus today remains on the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the conflict is intensifying with the M23 rebels backed by the neighbouring Rwanda, who have tightened their grip on the DRC's mineral-rich eastern region. Intense clashes continued throughout the past 24 hours, taking the death toll to over 100 and injuring around 1,000. The rebels have now seized the airport of Goma, the DRC's largest city in the east. This has forced the closure of the local airspace. Domestic flights have also reportedly been halted. The Goma airport serves as a vital hub, providing humanitarian access and means for evacuation. It is also a key point for regional connectivity and trade. Its capture is a major blow to the Congolese army that is fighting the M23 rebels. The rebels have claimed to capture the entire Goma city, but the DRC still says that the city has not fallen as the fighting continues. However, many videos show only M23 fighters and Rwandan forces marching on the city's streets. In fact, more than 1,200 Congolese soldiers have reportedly surrendered to the Rwandan forces. Several soldiers have fled and sought refuge in Rwanda. Videos show them sitting in rows on the floor of a cultural center where they were held by the Rwandan army. Rwandan soldiers were seen providing medical examinations to the surrendered troops. Meanwhile, the crisis has also forced many civilians to flee to Rwanda, as clashes and gunfire continued throughout the past 24 hours. Now, many bodies have been seen scattered in the streets of Goma, and there has been an increase in reports of sexual violence, rape and looting. Hospitals have been overwhelmed as casualties grow. The aid coming to the region has been blocked as the borders, ports and roads are shut. Several truck drivers carrying aid were trapped at the border.
We saw and heard terrible things. Dead bodies, gunshots, bombs. Things we have never experienced in our country. We thank God we have made it out.
Meanwhile, anger is growing among the people of DRC against the M23 rebels and Rwanda. In the capital, Kinshasa, protesters targeted several embassies of countries they accuse of complicity in Rwanda's support of the M23 rebels. The missions of France, Belgium, the United States, Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, and Rwanda were among those attacked and set ablaze. The police fired tear gas at protesters who attacked diplomatic buildings in the capital.
What Rwanda is doing is in collusion with France, Belgium, the United States of America, and others. Congolese people are tired. How many times do we have to die, and for how many days?
Now, the president of the DRC, Felix Tshisekedi, has refused to attend a crisis summit with the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. That was supposed to be chaired by the Kenyan president, William Ruto. Both sides are accusing each other of supporting opposing ethnic militias. The DRC alleges Rwanda's support ethnic Tutsi-led M23 rebel group, while Kigali accuses Kinshasa of supporting the Hutu militia. The Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, or the FDLR. However, Rwanda is accused of using the M23 rebels to loot the DRC's minerals in the North Kivu province, of which Goma is the capital. Now, Kigali is facing intense international pressure to withdraw its support to the M23 rebels, including from nations such as the US and China. Will the African neighbours work to resolve the crisis? Now, for more on this, we have with us Bram Verlest, a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies Africa. He is joining us live from Liège in Belgium. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Now, the M23 rebels have taken control of Goma's airport, making a major escalation in this conflict. What are the strategic and the political implications of this seizure for both the Congolese government and the regional stability?
Well, first of all, the M23 control goes beyond the Goma airport, as you mentioned, but they also reported now taking control of the city itself, or at least most of the city. I think the most immediate implications of these advances towards Goma and its entering of the city, which is the provincial capital of North Kivu, with a large population, including many displaced, are humanitarian. So the most recent estimates, around 700,000 internally displaced people are based in and around Goma. Between 40 and 50,000 have arrived in the city in the last weeks. And so fighting and the M23 control disrupts severely this much needed humanitarian access, as the airport is indeed closed and most roads to Goma are cut off. In addition to that, the fighting has also interrupted essential services as water, electricity supply, internet, which also increases humanitarian needs and affects the humanitarian response. Within the conflict, this is indeed a major escalation, and most observers were of the opinion that neither M23 or its backers had a real interest in taking Goma, as it took Goma briefly during the previous iteration of the movement in 2012. And when they did, this also marked the beginning of the end for the movement, and it led to increased international pressure on Rwanda, as well as internal divergences within the movement. It is worth stressing that M23 has researched for over 3 years now without taking Goma or attempting to. And during the first iteration in 2012, it only took 7 months for the movement to approach to Goma. I think there are several dimensions to these events, but a relevant background is a deadlock in the Luanda process, which is an Angolan-led mediation process aimed at de-escalating tensions between the DRC and Rwanda. And since December, talks had stalled after President Kagame did not show up to a presidential meeting because of a Congolese refusal to engage in a dialogue with M23 in the framework of this Luanda process. And since then, we have seen a progressive deterioration of the security situation on the terrain. The M23 has advanced and taken other towns as Masisi, Minova, Sake, and now Goma. And latest reports of today indicate that M23 is further progressing southwards towards Bukavu. And there are a lot of Burundian soldiers present in this area because Burundi has deployed bilaterally in support of Kinshasa against M23. And so these developments are likely to lead to a further regional escalation. And these regional geopolitics are important to understand the current situation. M23 has been pushing for a dialogue with Kinshasa. I would say that there is still uncertainty if this push to Goma was motivated to force Kinshasa to a concession and to the table with the M23 rebellion, or in the worst case scenario, a complete step away from the diplomatic process. As what we're seeing now is as with previous phases of escalation. Yes.
The protesters have targeted embassies in Kinshasa. This, of course, signaling growing public anger. What is driving this frustration, and how might it impact diplomatic relations between the DRC and its neighbours, particularly Rwanda and Uganda, which have both been accused of backing the M23?
Well, as your interviews mentioned, this seems to be, first of all, the result of a public anger with the international community's passivity and even perceived complicity with the Rwandan support to M23 and the Rwandan presence in the DRC. And so from this perspective, the targeting of the embassies, at least in part, resulted from this public and also politically fed perception that M23 crisis is part of a broader foreign current conspiracy aimed at taking control of Congo and its resources. I think the event itself on its own will not necessarily lead to a worsening of diplomatic relations, as the Congolese government did not instigate these attacks, and I also condemned them. But it's also relevant to point out that such protests have occurred in recent years before. Some of them have also directed the UN peacekeeping mission MONUSCO, so they are not new. I would also add that these actions rather reflect the already worsened and complicated diplomatic relations between the DRC and several countries, in particular Rwanda, but also Kenya and Uganda. Yeah. And so, of course, M23 receives this Rwandan support, and Kinshasa perceives M23 as not more than a front for mainly Rwandan interests. But it also has become increasingly frustrated with Kenya's and Uganda's position on the conflict, ranging from frustration with this passivity of the countries or this kind of political support to M23, to even suspicions that the countries might be actually supporting the movement. And so, in a way, these attacks of these embassies in Kinshasa have to be seen in light of this, and not necessarily a kind of new escalation. It's rather a reflection of already existing regional tensions over this conflict.
Right, and with over 100 people killed in the clashes, what role can international actors play in de-escalating the violence? And are there, in your view, any prospects for a ceasefire or diplomatic resolution in the near future?
I think first, the international and regional responses should prioritize the humanitarian situation and the question of this humanitarian access, because this is really urgent. And so this is what most international response has to go through now urgently. But secondly, there have been a variety of regional responses to this conflict, both militarily. We have a SADC mission, SAMI DRC present. We had the East Africa Community mission there. We have UN peacekeeping mission, bilateral deployment of Burundian forces. But also diplomatically, there have been several initiatives. Most important, the one already mentioned, the Luanda process, which is this mediation between the DRC and Rwanda, as well as the Nairobi process, which is a process facilitated by the former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and linked to the East Africa Community, which aims at a dialogue between the DRC and Congolese armed groups. So most efforts currently go through reviving these processes and trying to harmonize them. But this is complicated because the Nairobi process itself has stalled over the last years because of this regional tension that I mentioned, but also because of the DRC's response to this conflict, which was a mobilization of Congolese armed groups under a loose banner of what is called the Wazalendo, which is Swahili for patriots, which kind of undermines this whole demobilization process that Nairobi process seeks to support. And the Luanda process has also stalled, as I mentioned before, over Kinshasa's refusal to engage with M23, but also Rwanda, who undermines key instruments of this process by not sending military experts, for example, to this ad hoc verification mechanism, which is part of this. But we have seen a lot of international diplomatic efforts now. We have seen 2 Security Council briefings, an African Union meeting, East African Community Summit today, we have a SADC meeting tomorrow. So, and they all converge on the following.
We'll have to... Right, we have to leave it there, Bram. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa, for your valued insights and analysis there. Moving on to West Africa now, where 3 junta-led states have formally exited the Economic Community of West African States, or the ECOWAS regional bloc. Thousands hit the streets in Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali to back their junta regime's withdrawal from the West African bloc. In Niger, marches led by military regime members were held in the capital of Niamey. Hundreds chanted slogans against French President Emmanuel Macron.
We have understood that this ECOWAS, which was created as a people's ECOWAS, and no longer serves the people. It serves a master outside ECOWAS, that is imperialism. We marched blindly, and they stepped aside, continuing to serve imperialism. Today, we have understood that only struggle brings liberation.
In Burkina Faso, the country's prime minister and thousands of other citizens gathered in the capital of Ouagadougou's Nation Square.
AES has only existed for a short time, but the free movement of people and goods is already a reality. We know that if we continue to support our 3 leaders, all African countries will join AES because we will truly be able to liberate Africa.
In Mali, crowds rallied at Kanfuga, which is a symbolic area near the capital of Bamako.
A single Burkinabe with a weapon can do what is necessary. We have confidence in ourselves. Moreover, we have acquired heavy and light equipment, combat aircraft, and warplanes to defend this country. So we do not even need to seek assistance from a neighboring country or a former colonizer.
The 3 countries together have now teamed up to form a separate bloc called the Alliance of Sahel States, or the AES. The trio have also released a common passport. Their junta leaders have announced the creation of a 5,000-member unified army to fight jihadism that has plagued the region for years. Now, they see France, which has a high influence on the region, as a common enemy and favor partnerships with countries like Russia, Turkey and Iran. Russian flags were also a part of these support rallies in all of these nations. Now, the military junta states had sought an immediate withdrawal from ECOWAS in January of last year, alleging its excessive dependence on France and the West.
The 3 countries will officially cease to be members of ECOWAS from 29 January 2025. The authority decides to set the period from 29 January 2025 to 29 July 2025 as a transitional period, and to keep ECOWAS doors open to the 3 countries during the transition period.
However, ECOWAS required 1 year's notice for their departure to be effective. And now the departure of these 3 founding members from the 50-year-old bloc has left West Africa more fractured than ever. Shifting focus now, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has landed in trouble for freeing a Libyan warlord wanted by the International Criminal Court, or the ICC. Meloni revealed that prosecutors in Rome have opened an investigation against her and 2 government ministers for repatriating Libyan warlord Osama Najim last week. Najim is head of the Libyan Judicial Police and the director of an infamous migrant detention prison in Tripoli. He is accused by the ICC of committing war crimes against detainees such as torture, rape and murder. Last week, he was arrested in Italy's northern city of Turin, where he was attending a football match while on a warrant from the International Court. Italy is a founding member of the ICC and is obliged to arrest those wanted by the court. However, just 2 days after his arrest, he was released on procedural grounds by a Rome appeals court and flown to Libya on an Italian government plane. Meloni's government has been under fire from the opposition, human rights groups and the ICC itself for releasing Najim. ICC has demanded answers from the Meloni government. Meloni has defended the release of the Libyan warlord as the probe begins against her in Rome. She said the investigation is politically motivated and is triggered by a legal complaint filed by a lawyer and a former left-wing politician. Meloni said that she won't get blackmailed and intimidated, as she asked why the ICC only issued the warrant against the warlord when he entered Italy after spending days in other European nations.
Curiously, the court did it just when this person was about to enter Italian territory, after he had peacefully stayed for about 12 days in 3 other European states. The request for arrest of the public prosecutor's office of the International Criminal Court has not been transmitted to the Italian Ministry of Justice, as required by law, and for this reason the Court of Appeal of Rome decides not to proceed with its validation. At this point, with this subject free on Italian territory, rather than leaving him free, we decide to expel him and repatriate him immediately for security reasons. I am not blackmailable. I am not intimidated. Is it possible that for this reason I am, let's say, so disliked by those who do not want Italy to change and become better?
Critics have accused Meloni's government of aligning itself too closely with the Libyan authorities. Italy relies on Libya to curb migrant arrivals on the country's shores. It has signed an agreement under which it provides funding to the North African nation to prevent boats and refugees arriving in Italy. Now, as per reports, migration from Libya to Europe has significantly decreased by around 60% due to greater restrictions across the Mediterranean. However, Libyan authorities have been accused of brutal crimes on the migrants they detain. Now, recently, the European Commission decided to overhaul funding to North African nation of Tunisia due to reports of human rights abuses. However, immigration is a key agenda for the Meloni government, and it is known for a hardline approach on the issue. Will the latest investigation change her approach? We will keep you posted. Now, our last story for the day is about DeepSeek. The Chinese artificial intelligence company has shaken up the global tech ecosystem and stock markets in recent days. Its low-cost chatbot has ignited extensive amounts of interest among South Africans who have embraced the AI technology with open arms. The app has overtaken Chinese online marketplace Temu and topped the charts in the country. Moreover, DeepSeek's meteoric rise has also reignited debates on resource allocation and funding in Africa, which is still lagging behind other regions in terms of adopting artificial intelligence. Our next report gets you all the details.
In recent days, the meteoric rise of Chinese AI startup DeepSeek has been reverberating across the global tech ecosystem and stock markets. It has prompted industry leaders and investors to reconsider their strategies and has reignited debates on resource allocation, energy efficiency, and the democratization of AI development. The Chinese company has claimed that its flagship chatbot, developed for under $6 million, is powered by a large language model that rivals offerings from US tech giants like OpenAI and Google. By contrast, OpenAI has reportedly invested billions in developing its models and the supporting infrastructure. This stark cost disparity has challenged the long-standing assumption that scaling artificial intelligence requires immense financial resources, shaking industry norms and creating new possibilities, especially in Africa. For Africans, who have often struggled to secure funding and access to competitive digital infrastructure, DeepSeek's innovation and technology is both a challenge and a beacon of hope. Democratizing AI development could unleash untapped potential for Africa. Historically, African startups and businesses have faced barriers such as limited access to computing power and insufficient investments in research and development. By showing that DeepSeek is an economic and easily available option, AI will be the main proponent that will grow large and small-scale businesses in Africa, and this is visible in South Africa. South Africans have embraced DeepSeek with open arms. According to reports, the Chinese AI app topped the charts in the country. But as interest for AI grows in Africa, it has a much larger role to play in the continent. The introduction of AI could lead to digital transformation in the world's youngest continent, and the entry of a Chinese AI firm could mean that American firms will soon push for greater reach into Africa in an attempt to cut China's influence. The data center and AI market is already growing rapidly in Africa. The artificial intelligence market is projected to reach a value of $16.53 billion by 2030 in Africa. And this is primarily fueled by increasing demand for cloud computing, digital services, and AI applications. Countries such as Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa are leading AI development in the continent. Citizens in these countries have also been quick to adopt generative AI technologies, including DeepSeek. Yet, DeepSeek's meteoric rise has raised pressing questions about the potential impact on the continent's AI infrastructure. Significant gaps continue to exist in basic infrastructure in Africa. The continent still lags behind other regions in providing stable electricity, reliable internet access, and data centers, which are crucial for running AI algorithms effectively. Additionally, the continent also lacks regulatory framework to effectively regulate the growth of AI. But with the world picking up the pace on adopting artificial intelligence, the need for Africa to ramp up its efforts have increased more than ever.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.